Hey, good morning, everybody. I don't know what day it is. I guess it's Wednesday. Smack dab in the middle of week. We are in medias res, struggling with all of the conflicting imperatives of our lives, both domestic and foreign.
Guess what, though?
What?
It ain't Thursday.
No, it's not Thursday. And it's not Freitag, and it's not Saturday. It's not the weekend yet. So welcome. Good morning, everybody. If you're Donald Trump, you're waking up this morning thinking, damn, I'm going to get rid of the 49th or the 50th state. What's up with Vermont? Now, I'm not going to sell my house there, even though it went for sticky icky nicky and against Donald Trump. But otherwise, Trump smashed it on Super Tuesday, as did Sleepy Joe Biden. So it's becoming obvious that it will be, barring death or other disability, Biden versus Trump. Of course, Joe did lose American Samoa. I think I read somewhere that there were 100 votes cast in America Samoa, and some local guy captured them. So that's not going to stop the Biden train from, well, I guess if you can stumble up jet airplane steps, what do you do down the track? You don't stumble down a track, but you don't go roaring down the track. I'd say trickling down the track.
The stupid shuffle. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
And I see some commentary on Trump's remarks last night that he was not joyous. He had a dark and bleak perspective of America's future. And a few people walked out of his remarks as a result of that. I mean, what do you expect him to say? And I do think we are in dystopian times, and I think that darkness is the norm right now. The immigration crisis is real. The crisis in legitimacy in the country is real. Our foreign entanglements and how to respond to them best are real. The lack of a sense of national purpose is real. The fact that we've got two candidates, as geriatric as can be, seeking to run the country, each apparently responding to different visions, no one vision of which capturing us all, that portends conflicts and difficulties. We said at the beginning of the year that 2024 as an election year was going to present us with unsavory choices and difficult decisions. I didn't really expect it to be a replay of 2016, and it may not yet be. I do think that Haley's triumph, if you want to call it that, her narrow victory in Vermont will keep her train moving down the tracks. But I mean, how does it look down in North Carolina?
Well, in North Carolina, we're looking a little like this. So Attorney General Josh Stein, who I've talked glowingly about on this stream, sarcasm there if I didn't sell that well enough. He is the Democrat challenger for the governorship here in North Carolina, also the acting attorney general, and emphasis on the acting. He's been really just in campaign mode for the vast majority of the latter part of 23, and of course all of this year thus far. And then Mark Robinson, who is the current lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and has been viciously and savagely criticized for his, very, what we call them, radical positions on, the definition of a man and woman, his belief and favoritism toward the things like the First and Second Amendments to the United States Constitution, and has been very vocal about what is going on in the public education system. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, to me, is the front runner. He will, and obviously here you see a picture of him. This is from the Carolina Journal, but you see there he is obviously endorsed President Trump, and I believe President Trump has endorsed him as well. So what we saw yesterday through Super Tuesday, and we've got plenty of support from Mark Robinson, is that North Carolina is mimicking much of the populist surge, the America First surge here. I think we have a few other candidates for elected office. One in particular, I think, in the education realm that actually beat out the expected front runner for the Republican nomination, and her position has largely been, Parents' Bill of Rights. what's going on with the curriculum in schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here in North Carolina, same stuff, Norm, same stuff, and I think you'll see the rhetoric really, to continue savaging Mark Robinson. You'll see that continue apace in the next several weeks.
I guess I just look at this presidential campaign and even the down ticket campaigns going on around the country, and nothing captures my imagination right now. It seems like we're on a cycle, and these campaigns are circling a drain, and that drain is the Americans is something that's sucking the American spirit down it. It's just not a happy place to be.
Yeah, I don't see it that way. I certainly understand that, but I think that that's a pretty short term view. My view right now is that if the elections in November carry forward with the momentum that we're seeing out of the Republican primary, and that the results are as such, if Trump is elected, and if the likes of Mark Robinson are elected, that sure that these people don't represent a vision of the future that appears to be unified in terms of the entire country, but I do think that these people are they are the ones that will be holding the front lines for the more competent and the more ambitious younger people to have time to get into positions of political influence to right the ship. I think that this is necessary to stop the surge of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've got a story today that we'll talk about with the Department of Veterans Affairs and that memo that went out saying that the VJ Day poster needed to come down across all medical facilities, and then very quickly having that memo rescinded. I think that what we're seeing is that this sort of wokeness has run its course, in my view, but that doesn't mean that there are the likes of Vivek Ramaswamy all over the country ready and able to take the reins. And for that reason, we need Mark Robinson. We need Donald Trump. We need these people that are going to stand there and hold the line while the rest of us get our pants on.
Well, there is that. I mean, we'll find out. Let's see what happens. I'm glad Super Tuesday's done. It's pretty, and I see Dawn is sending a note, McNeil, that Haley's dropping out of the race today. I haven't seen that in what I looked at this morning. Dawn, if you've got a link to the story, I'd love to see it. Or if that's just your intuition and forecast, let us know. Something tells me it's more than that, but we'll find out. Hey, so this business about VJ Day, and we're going to take it down. No, we're not. I at some point, it was a non-consensual touching, right? I mean, obviously, this woman's estate is going to be suing the U.S. Department of Navy for sexual assault, because, but for that,
where though? Where's the proper venue for that lawsuit?
Hell. I mean, look, what goes on between a man and a woman is this stuff of mystery, and love is a gift that you receive and give unexpectedly. Sometimes we do our best to insist that people color within the lines, and thus we have 10 commandments, we have taboos, we have social norms, and we have customs. But if you've lived beyond the age of 10 years old, you realize that there are from time to time times when you're struck by lightning. I listened this morning on the way into the office to a Van Halen article and or a Van Halen tune, trying to remember the song Love Comes Walking In. And it's some sort of alien, whether awake or alive, suddenly you find this other person in your life and kaboom, it's transformed. Okay, so we've won the war. My life is no longer threatened. I'm no longer going on that boat where I might be blown to smithereens by a torpedo I never saw. And today I have the joy of being alive. And come here, young lady, let me plant one on you to share it with you. Only in our time would some lizard breath, skank, excuse my language, claim that this was a sign of non-consensual touching and need to be censored. If we start to censor the joy out of our life, if we start to censor spontaneity out of it, if we start to manufacture strictures on how, when, where, and why love can blossom, we're going to lose the willingness to live. I mean, the point Socrates once said is not to live, but to live well. And I think if you think about it, we're surrounded by mysteries daily. And I look at that poster as a sign of tremendous joy and relief. So I guess the VJ, I mean, or the department decided it was going to take it was going to take it down, and now they've rescinded that. What's the
Yeah,
politics
so I
there?
want to, for those of you that may not be familiar with this story, and it seems to have a pretty short shelf life here because we've already had that the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Dennis McDonough, come out and say that it's not going to be removed. But the original memo that was published was by the Assistant Undersecretary for Health for Operations, Rima Ann Nelson. And it stated in relevant part, quote, a respectful and safe workplace and is in keeping with our broader efforts to promote a culture of inclusivity and awareness. This memorandum requests the removal of the VJ Day in Times Square photograph from all Veterans Health Administration facilities in alignment with the Department of Veterans
You know,
Affairs.
I read a memo like that, and here's what I think: we need to have BJ Day in this country. Whoever wrote that memo is in dire need of a blowjob. Okay, I mean,
And
that's
yeah,
just the most uptight bullshit imaginable.
well, I mean, here's the real irony in that to me is that who is seeing that in Veterans Affairs facilities that one thinks the same way, or two even understands the historical context for that kiss and makes the logical or mental leap that it would have been sexual assault. Right? Those are two completely different things. We talk all the time here, at least I do, about the complete lack of historical memory and historical
Well,
perspective.
okay, but let's talk about that then. Yeah, let's talk about that photograph. So, Connecticut, for example, just to give one example of the model penal code, has 4 degrees of sexual assault, and it encompasses all sorts of intimate contact between persons. Sexual assault in the first degree would obviously be forcible rape done by well, not obviously. I'm telling you, it is forcible rape. Penetration of any penetration wherever that may be by use of force or threat of use of force. Then there's second degree sexual assault, which talks about abusing people in positions of dependency and so forth, and lesser forms of involvement. And then there's unlawful touching, and then there's touching for purposes of sexual gratification or humiliation. Now, clearly, this guy's touching her in a way that, if you're on your way to work or for a gallon of milk at the grocery store and some guy stops you on the street there, okay, that may be objectionable, and maybe you can claim that there was unlawful contact, and maybe a crime has occurred. But in the context of that particular time, where a nation was released from the imperatives of war and had won, Mike, what's the matter with us? Yeah, Dawn, they have my consent to kiss my ass. Well, there you go. Loose lips don't just sink ships. They might have another purpose.
Well, and apparently, the message on social media after this came out, and there was massive pushback. The secretary said, "quote Let me be clear: this image is not banned from VA facilities, and we will keep it in VA facilities." He said. So I think that what is clear is that somebody in that department made a decision that was not in keeping with the chain of command. That's the way that I would look at this, and was completely out of bounds. But is just yet another illustration of how unimpressive and unremarkable the people are that staff these positions and wield this sort of weird influence. Right? What did I say? Small power wielded mightily. This is yet another example. Imagine the self image one must have to send out that memo thinking it was going to have some other impact other than hollow bullshit virtue signaling. I do want to quickly. I'm going to throw you a quick curveball, Norman. I'm going to throw this on the screen. So number one, New York Post has the banner at the top there, breaking news that Nikki Haley to suspend the presidential campaign. But T-Girl asked, and I think I sent this to you yesterday, this link that judges improperly enhanced sentences of more than 100 January 6 rioters, appeals court rules. Will any of your clients be affected by this finding?
Possibly. And then the question is whether the resentencing will have an impact. So under federal sentencing guidelines, An offense carries a base offense level, it gets a numerical score, and then offense characteristics can add points to it. And so what this ruling says basically is that disrupting what those courts that have added points to the guidelines calculation, and the number of points given in a guidelines calculation dictates the sentence to be that is presumptively reasonable. So what the appellate court has held is that administration of justice means disrupting a judicial or quasi-judicial proceeding, not anything that disrupts the operation of government. And therefore, those judges who gave enhancements or who enhanced sentences because people disrupted January 6th, those judges who did that gave sentences that are potentially too high. And so these defendants will most likely go back to court for resentencing. But here's the danger. Suppose you were convicted of 3 counts, and one count was, chewing bubble gum in the wrong place. That's 10 years. Another count was picking your nose in the wrong place. That's 10 years. And the third count was this, and that's 5 years, but it gets enhanced to 10. So if and all of those sentences were imposed concurrently, that is to run at the same time. In that case, if you take the 10 years out for the administration of justice offense, you're still serving 10 years for the bubblegum and nose picking. And therefore, that offers you no practical relief. So I suspect that what will happen is, first, the United States government will take a certiorari petition to the United States Supreme Court to see if the court properly read that. And this is an issue that is remarkably similar to the issue in the Fisher case that'll be argued in April. I think it's April 16th, if memory serves. And that had to do with whether the disruption of an official proceeding element was satisfied, or corrupt purposes was satisfied by disrupting Congress. And so it's a question of statutory definition and the scope of the application of a statute. So I think that pragmatically speaking, okay, the DC Circuit has ruled. The United States government may do a motion for rehearing or rehearing en banc to get the opinion of a larger panel. If the government loses at that level, it's likely to take a petition for certiorari. By the time it takes that petition and the thing is calendared to be heard, there won't be time to brief it and argue it this year. The court has conferences at which it considers petitions a couple times a month. The court shuts down at the end of June. Soon we'll get a cascading series of decisions, the most significant decisions at the end of the term. So assuming that a petition gets filed for certiorari, and the government, I think, has 120 days, if I'm not mistaken, to file a petition. They may not even need to get a petition in before the end of the term. If the court grants certiorari, they're not going to be able to get arguments in until late fall or early 2025. So it seems to me unlikely that there'll be any immediate practical relief for the J6 defendants. Obviously, it's something to argue about. And in the end, if there is relief offered, it's likely to be illusory for many people, because the sentence that have been imposed on them would be covered by other offenses. Very few people are charged with but one crime. They're usually charged with multiple crimes, and those sentences are then imposed concurrently.
Well, and then I think that this goes, so there is the administration of justice enhancement that we're talking about here narrowly, but for our purposes here in the Proud Boys defendants and the seditious conspiracy convictions, we talked a lot about the sentencing guidelines and then the what was offered via plea deals, the disparity between what was offered by the Department of Justice to those defendants and then what they sought from the court thereafter, and the implementation of those enhancements on their sentences. What is the connection, if any at all? And I'm not assuming that there is, but is there, what sort of enhancement was applied to that of, for example, Joe Biggs?
I think an administration, I candidly, I can't recall. I started to pull up the sentencing transcript this morning at about 4:30 and then got distracted by something else because I wanted to see if this was going to have practical relief for him. But I think he was sentenced to so many counts that I think the cover problem is going to be real. In other words, no one offense drove him to the 17-year range. Several offenses carried that prospect, and the result will be that there's likely to not be practical relief. And I don't want to hold out the hope that there is, lest that get back to him and he feels that there's reason to believe that his sentence will be reduced, when in fact there is no reason to believe that, at least at this point.
Well, and then, with that, I think that just a quick, betting odds, what would be more likely, that there would be some relief from him, or that Trump commutes, sentences from January 6th upon ascending to office?
So this is one thing that I'm very confused about as I've watched Donald Trump talk about the J6 people. There's a tremendous sense in the J6 community that he's betrayed folks, that he could have and should have acted long ago when he had the power to act, and that he encouraged people to act out and act up, and when they did, he walked away. He has from time to time said things like he would commute most of the sentences except for those who were engaged in violent conduct. So then the question becomes, what constitutes violent conduct? Very few people have been charged with assault on a police officer. Is that violent conduct? What if you were defending yourself from police violence? Is that violent conduct? What if you broke a window? Is that violent conduct? What if you were part of a crowd that overran police officers? Is that violent conduct? I think, the safer thing for him to do would simply be to commute everyone's sentence. But I doubt that he'll do that. And if he starts drawing lines, those lines are going to look somewhat arbitrary. But I think if he is elected, I would expect him to commute most of the sentences. I would expect him to send a memo out. Enough of these prosecutions. I mean, I got a note yesterday from one of my clients, he who has been charged in the J6 context. The person that he was with at the Capitol was instructed to turn himself in, I think today or tomorrow. So arrests are occurring even today for this 3.5-year-old event.
Well, something we'll keep an eye on. I don't want to get too bogged down into that, but it's a question worth asking, because you're right. I think that, I remember vividly, the 4 months that you spent in trial. On
5.5 months. You don't remember it that vividly, Einstein. I mean, I know you just turned 34, but don't start telling me you're suffering from geriatric memory loss. Just because you outlive Jesus doesn't make you divine.
I am excited.
And on that topic, have you ever thought about prenup agreements in context of, what is a prenuptial agreement, Mike?
Prenuptial agreement is where two parties that are going to be married under the law divide their assets and agree not to, if the marriage dissolves for whatever reason, that they are not going to take the other's assets upon departure and dissolution of that marriage.
But isn't that a way of saying, I do, but just in case you don't, I'm going to screw you? So consider the following marriage. Mary comes home one night and says to Joseph, I'm pregnant. And Joseph says, who did it? She says, God. And Joseph's like, what? He's not incredulous. He accepts that they were beatified and made members of the sainthood. And 2,000 years, we're still talking about them. I mean, if they had had a prenuptial agreement, maybe the marriage would have been called off. I don't know. At some point, you have to take things on faith. And I would think in matters of love, a prenuptial agreement spoils things. It's a way of saying maybe when you're saying I do. So let me ask you a personal question. Any prenuptial agreements in the Boyer household?
None.
That's because you didn't have anything. None in our household either. So if you're listening, dear, and you decide to throw me to the curb, you can have it all. I'm done. Hey, what's this with that? Are Trump's lawyers getting desperate? I understand, Fawny Willis. And again, I say Fawny with some irony because I never met a fawn that had a fat ass. So I'm going to call her Fanny. I understand Fanny Willis. McAfee's going to rule any day now, and she may or may not be in the case any longer. But this strikes me as a little desperate that Trump's lawyers are going to now accuse Bragg of unethical conduct because of jailing an elderly executive and protecting Cohen. I mean, people commit a crime, they're going to be sentenced. The prosecution has a decision about what to do with the people it prosecutes and whether to offer them agreements or protection in exchange for the information they have to offer. Is there any substance to this claim, or is this just more wind from the windbag?
I think that there is substance to this claim, and I guess there's a few things here to unpack. Number one, being desperate would imply that there isn't an ethical issue that is ripe and being adjudicated right now in the Georgia election prosecution from Fani Willis, and so that may be wind in the sails of the Trump camp to say, look, if all we have to do is find one credible, good faith argument to make, we expose it, we drive very hard in an acute way at that, and then we create a firestorm within the ranks of the district attorney's office through that. In the case of Bragg, we've long talked about this. The unprecedented value of the case against Trump coming from Bragg is that he's charged with what have historically always been misdemeanors, and there is an enhancement for conduct alleged to be related to the Trump campaign for election in 2016. So these are the hush money payments. The issue here appears to me to be, what is it, Weisselberg, who was a member of the Trump organization for 50 years. 50 years, like mind-blowing, that he was a member of the Trump organization for 50 years. He was already on probation, Norm. So he had been convicted prior. He was on probation. He had served at Rikers for, I think, 99 days, something to that effect. And then he has subsequently pleaded guilty, I think, from what I understand, to these charges of saying that, Trump's office or his penthouse square footage was bigger than it actually is. He's pleaded guilty to not upset any of the terms of his probation in the prior conviction. But what's going on is that the court is now taking as truth everything that Michael Cohen has said. Now, our viewers and listeners should recall we talked about Michael Cohen using artificial intelligence, that is ChatGPT, to generate a pleading and submitted that pleading to a court for its review, which contained references to cases that did not exist in his motion to terminate his unsupervised probation. So there are issues of Cohen's credibility that were already going to be coming into this case. Judge Engoron in the civil fraud trial brought by Letitia James wanted to, I guess said that, Cohen's testimony in that case was unassailable, that there was nothing to worry about in terms of his credibility. And what I believe Trump's lawyers here are doing are saying that this court it can't just be selective on the terms of perjury, because Michael Cohen has perjured himself on multiple occasions within this case and in other contexts. And we can't have Michael Cohen being a key witness in this investigation and in this trial against Trump for something that is unprecedented in value, criminal in nature, and then also have a conviction of somebody on these really technical grounds, right? Sending a 76-year-old man to jail for up to 5 years for these really technical pleas to things that we already adjudicated in a civil case, but then that judge gives no weight to the evidence contra on Michael Cohen, but this court will give it all of the weight, right? So that's the essence of this.
Well, I hear you, but I mean, justice isn't blind. I mean, it looks at the nature of the case before it, and the interest that the government is pursuing when it seeks to prosecute. And prosecutors have discretion to go hard on some people and not on another. And the old saying is, if you can't do the crime, or if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. I mean, 5 years to a 76-year-old is potentially a death sentence. It's certainly a substantial portion of the remainder of his life. But you don't get a discount for age. I mean, if that were the case, a 60-year-old guy, you killed somebody, well, you get a discount. I mean, so I get it. I get it. What's this about no down payment home loans for illegal immigrants in California? Are they out of their mind?
Yeah, so I saw this story in the Sun this morning, and I found the legislation that's being put forth. I'll go ahead and throw that on the screen here. But I think this is just another eye on what California has been up to. This was originally introduced back in mid-January this year. But this is just putting more into the context of the crisis at our southern border, and now what is happening with our federal banking system and the enabling of undocumented and illegal immigrants in the country to actually have no down payment home loans part of their repertoire for, and I guess the public purpose here is to increase home ownership. Now, I have personal friends.
Yeah, that works for me. You know, hey,
I have personal
take the
friends in
house.
Southern
Why, you know,
California.
I got a better idea. Just give them the goddamn things. Excuse my language, folks. That wasn't me
Well,
speaking.
isn't that what it is?
Rico.
Isn't that what it is? And so here's the issue with a no down home loan, or really a no down loan for basically anything. And the deal with home ownership is skin in the game, right? The idea is equity. That's been the downfall of sort of public accommodations and multifamily housing subsidized by the federal government, state governments, home financing agencies, all these things where, multifamily apartment units are put together and then the value is driven down. My issue is simply this, the notion of home ownership is the creation of equity in something. And if you put some of your own personal income or your personal net worth into buying that and then agreeing with a lender, right? 58 people in a 4-bedroom. That's funny. You don't actually, you actually have a stake in that game, or at least presumptively so. My issue is that if you have no down home loans, these loans are ripe for something like BlackRock and these other major financiers and financial institutions to come up and scoop up these homes when the payments are imminently not made, when these loans fall into default. And then there are actions for uh, default brought into local courts. Well, who the hell is going to be bidding on these properties? And it's going to be those with money to burn. And in a situation right now, economically, where people are complaining all over the place about stagflation, inflation, the fact that the dollar is not going very far these days, there is a real question as to whose benefit this really is. The illusion of home ownership for those that are not likely to be able to carry forward the term of a mortgage, or is it for those that are inevitably going to be there to scoop these things up for pennies on the dollar when the defaulting parties are not able to actually represent themselves?
I don't know. I think that we need to have a better and different conversation about immigration than we're having. I mean, Field of Dreams put it well. If you build it, they will come. We've built a successful society here, and it's obviously the case that people are going to come in and want to be part of this. How we give them access and what we do with them once we get here is a national discussion we need to have. The idea that we're going to be giving people who just arrive here and say hola or whatever the equivalent is from wherever they've come, something that we don't give people who are already in this country. It just sets wrong with me. You want a stake in the community. How about creating a community with people who are already there? I don't, it's
well, the irony is, and I hear other pundits talk about this all the time, right? That younger generations, younger millennials, Gen Z, the idea of home ownership is sort of a joke. It's a meme in a way, right? And that the system as it currently sits has been brought to a state of absolute excess that excludes the ability for young people, young couples, to actually indulge the American dream of having property, real property of their own. And so I think that those two narratives in parallel are what make me so skeptical of the fact that we have state governments such as California, rolling over backwards to create these sort of no down payment home loans for those that are not staked in this country as citizens, are not paying income taxes at the state level, the federal level, who have not participated, whose families haven't been staked here for generations. And yet those younger millennials and Gen Z, often those that have who were coerced into the higher education system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are being just kind of given the middle finger. And to me, that's what makes it very obvious that this is not a benevolent force for those that are coming across our borders looking for the American dream. This is just a delay tactic for big banks to scoop up more real estate in the next 5 to 10 years. That's my opinion.
I hear you. But it just, the cunning of reason, this concept from Hegel, that somehow things in history unfold in some necessary manner. And in the end, they all tend toward a certain direction, which is sort of spirit becoming aware of itself in time. I don't buy that. And I don't buy the Whig interpretation of history. That is that things always tend to get better. I take the view of chaos and that somehow the heart has, I'm with Blaise Pascal. The heart has reasons that reasons know not. And people look for a sense of satisfaction where they're at. And if they can't find it, they go where they think they can and they do the best once they get there. And in the end, it's all an infinite struggle of one against the other to come together and create a life that's worth living. I just simply think that imperative, the chaotic imperative, is what's driving American politics right now. And we're trying to impose various dreams on it. Now, I hear what you're saying about big bankers and big banks.
Well, I mean, it's easy, Norm. It's not. I can go a layer deeper. I mean, the mortgage process. I'm not sure when the last time that you've gone through sort of the deed of trust of the mortgage process, probably in the Vermont area, right? But
a few years
there's
ago.
plenty of hands in that till along the way, right? Underwriters, the lenders, the real estate brokers, the technology that those entities deploy to do their various jobs. There's plenty of people who have a vested interest in there being an increasing volume of mortgages handed out. Right. So it's not an unwitting vision that I'm giving you right here. It's the fact that I know that there are plenty of people who in the short term will make quite a lot of money because the federal government or the state government is making this a priority. What I'm saying is that it's becoming a priority because there are people at the top in these larger financial institutions that know the same thing that I just dictated to you and to the audience, that there are plenty of people who will look the other way, even if they recognize that existential problem, and still do it because it'll put money directly into their pocket because more people are living hand to mouth than not. Consequence long-term be damned.
All right. Well, preach, Mike Morey says. Say amen, say hallelujah. Brother Mike is on the stand, and he's been inspired by the Holy Toast. You said the Holy Toast. I mean, I thought it was the Holy Ghost. No, I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in toasts, cinnamon raisin, bagel, light bagels, whole wheat, rye, dry rye toast with a couple ham and eggs. That's particularly good. So anyhow, Boyer keeps nailing it, Gold Store says. I know that I'm sort of out of it and distracted today because I've got to get to court. And I've got to be there fairly soon, about 30 miles away.
Sure.
So we should wrap it up.
We will. So we're here every day, 8 a.m. Eastern time, and I'm giving this spiel because, good Lord, YouTube, thank you. You're outpacing Rumble today. And if you're over on Rumble, I'm looking at you.
If you're over there on Rumble, what the hell's the matter with you? I mean,
I guess, look, Rumble didn't go down when everybody else was getting hacked the other day. So I guess that's a good thing. But by and large, YouTube is typically where fewer people are. And I think this actually might be X. X is going ham for us over at LawPod Daily. So maybe too much attribution.
And don't forget, follow us at LawPod Daily. We want to get to 1,000 followers so that we can go from there to 2,000, 50,000, 100,000. Because when people are looking for inspiration, looking for love, they come here. And we give it to them, and we give it to you every day. We be here for you. We love you a long, long time, GIs. So come to us at LawPod Daily every day at 8, and every now and then we will go long. You think I'm referring to a sexual metaphor? I'm not. I'm of such an age. What's the difference between sex and a 100-yard dash for an old man? About 8 seconds, right? And
a couple of hamstrings, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, a couple of hamstrings. All right, folks, listen, that'll do it for today. Mike, how do people find us, and when will we be back?
At LawPod Daily on YouTube, at LawPod Daily on X. You can find us at Law and Legitimacy on Rumble, and if you don't find us in video form, live stream, or the replays thereafter, you can always catch us audio only on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Audible, Overcast, wherever you find premium podcasts. Subscribe to the newsletter at lawpoddaily.com, and that will be coming out tomorrow. This week's newsletter number 7, will be here tomorrow morning. So, Norm, I will see you tomorrow, my man. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Great to see you. And, I'm not really sorry for castigating all the people over on Rumble. I'm just saying that there are better alternatives. See you tomorrow, Norm.
Ciao.